Welcome back. Just gone 6.5 minutes past 1. Up next on Talkback, workers' rights for vegans. Yes, we will be debating proposals from the Vegan Society that employers should do more to protect the rights of vegans in the workplace, which might also include, for example, tackling offensive banter and getting meat-free options out there. Do you think employers need to do more to protect the rights of vegans in the workplace? The Vegan Society thinks so, and they've published new guidelines to help businesses look after their vegan staff. There's new advice, including having a shelf in the office fridge, offering vegan menus at events to provide vegan-friendly workwear for people who want it or need it. The charity also wants vegans to be exempt from corporate events like horse racing. Maybe your employers will pay for a day out, or activities that might include cooking a hog roast on a barbecue. Other recommendations include colour-coded kitchen equipment, separate areas to prepare meat-free food, as well as non-leather phone cases or non-leather protective items being exempt from any part of purchasing non-vegan products, and the chance for staff to have discussions about vegan-friendly pension options. They also want employers to do more to protect their staff, vegan staff, from harassment or hostility or offensive banter in the workplace. So lots of ideas there. Not something many of us have even thought about in the past, but there's a growing number of vegans in our population, and veganism is now a big news story, often across these islands. Rosemary Connolly is with us, an employment lawyer. How are you doing, Rosemary?
Hi, how are you?
Could you just give us a sense of what employers are required to do legally when it comes to something like this, veganism?
Yes, well, it's important to say that in Northern Ireland we have a fair employment regime as opposed to the Equality Act 2010, which is the act that governs philosophical beliefs in the workplace across the water. However, employers are still in Northern Ireland expected to respect and not do anything to undermine the properly held philosophical amounting to religious beliefs of employees, and therefore although we have had no direct tribunal ruling in Northern Ireland, it's very likely, in my view, since there's a commonality in the terminology used in the legislation, that it's someone who is a vegan in a workplace in Northern Ireland who considers that they have been less favourably treated or in fact directly discriminated against, would be well placed to bring and successfully claim unlawful discrimination. So the Vegan Society, in my view, has done employers a relative favour in setting out in very practical terms the sorts of things that should be looked out for in workplaces. And, whereas their practical guidance references veganism, obviously other persons from different religious persuasions do have aspects of their religious observance which require them to eat or not eat certain products. So things like having a separate shelf, having colour-coded utensils, not requiring people to attend functions which are of the nature you referenced earlier in the programme. These are, these are kind of straightforward matters that I think most employers addressing their mind to the situation will find relatively easy to accommodate.
What about this one where someone might wish to be exempt from any part of purchasing non-vegan goods? What if you work in a company, for example, that makes cars or something, where you may be involved in purchasing items that include leather?
Yeah, well, everything will be governed by reasonableness, and at the end of the day, it will, in my view, it will amount to whether someone, as an employee, is being directly, negatively or adversely affected by some aspect of the workplace, just as I've said, in terms of the physical environment and what you're in functions that you're required to attend.
All right.
It seems to me that it will be a much broader aspect to look at all matters in which a company might be involved, and it might, in my view, that would be much more difficult to argue that that was a direct infringement or undermining of one's actual employment rights, because employment law is underpinned by reasonableness at the end of the day.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Rosemary. Rosemary Connolly, employment lawyer. We're also joined by Barbara Bolton, who's legal counsel for Go Vegan World, and the businessman and recruitment specialist Max Mackin. Welcome to both of you.
Hi.
Good afternoon. What do you think of this, Max?
Well, some of the things Rosemary said, I kind of disagree with, because the guidelines were put out, but just guidelines about the vegan
from a charity.
From a charity, sort of saying you could sort of like maybe sort of take these things on board, but veganism is a choice. It's something that you sort of choose to do and want to be. So for an employer, which Rosemary says, it's quite reasonable for them to sort of like fund all these extra things for these employees, or if you're in the hospitality industry, excuse them from sort of like attending functions that there might be meat there for, all at the employer's expense, which I just think sort of is completely unreasonable. If I'm a vegan and I'm going for a job, surely it's my choice to understand sort of like what that type of job is and what that job entails, and be the best employee I possibly can to the employer, to demonstrate that I'm worthy of sort of hiring. But if I was to come in and say, listen, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that, and for my beliefs, because I'm a vegan, I'm never going to do this, what employer in their right mind in that industry?
Religion's a choice too, isn't it?
Religion's a choice, but it's a bit sort of, if you said so, religion, is that about like what you can eat, what you can't eat? In some areas it is.
Be in some cases.
But being a vegan is not a religious choice. If you're talking about laws,
it's a moral choice,
and so is some religions.
Exactly, that's the point. It's a philosophical belief.
If you're going to take it to that end of the spectrum, I would sort of say that anybody who's going to take that view and try and operate within that arena, be prepared to be let down. Employers who will feel it's like maybe you're not going to show up or you're not going to do certain work will always opt for the other person who will do it.
Well, Barbara, be prepared to be let down.
If I could address a few of those points. Firstly, I was very happy to hear Rosemary talk about the protections that do apply to vegans. It's great to hear somebody in mainstream employment law now recognising that. I think Max is coming from a perspective where he doesn't really understand what veganism is, and no offence to him about that. There's a lot of portrayal of so-called veganism in the media that really doesn't do it justice. So the protections for veganism actually date back to the 1950s. The Article 9 of the European Convention on Human Rights protects our right to freedom of thought, conscience and belief, not just religious beliefs, but very, very clearly, and running through all of the case law since then, non-religious convictions, moral convictions, as you've said yourself. And that's precisely what veganism is. So it's not a diet. It's not about not eating this or that. It's about acknowledging and respecting the right of non-human animals to their own lives, for them not to be used as property, not regarded as commodities, not exploited and not killed. And the fundamental thing here that we really need to get to grips with is the need for education and training in every workplace to ensure that every employee in a place of employment really grasps that, because I think that then leads to respect and understanding, and that's what's lacking at the moment. We've just carried out a survey, Go Vegan World, of vegans across the UK and Ireland, and what we're hearing is that there's still a real lack of understanding of veganism, which leads to harassment, where people are being ridiculed and undermined on a daily basis, to the point where they're telling us that they dread going into work or that they've had to leave a place of work. Most employers want to comply with the law, firstly, so Max is doing them a disservice by discouraging them from that. But secondly, most employers want to have a place of work that is a positive environment for their employees, and they would really not like for their employees to be going home dreading going to work because their fundamental moral beliefs are being ridiculed.
Max?
Well, you called me out twice, said I was naive and said I was wrong. And you said it's sort of like veganism, anybody who's a vegan is there for a specialist reason. But there was an article on the BBC Radio or on the website today, and one of the people who was a vegan who was talking about it says people are vegans for multiple choices. It's not just one thing or one belief. It could be for all host of different reasons that they're vegans. But you seem to sort of like push everyone into the same sort of like pack and say, no, we're all vegans because of this. So I disagree with that. But also, I didn't say that people shouldn't be. And I do know a bit about veganism. But at the same time, I was coming from an employer's point of view, who may not be able to afford to let certain members of staff take time off to attend the function because that function is going to pay him to help pay, or her to help pay their wages. So you can't just have your cake and eat it and sort of say, even if it's a vegan cake, and say this sort of like, well, employers should do this, employers should say on people's rights and stuff, because sometimes people just can't afford to do it. If I'm going for a job and I'm a vegan, I should be aware of the job I'm going for and the industry I'm going to work in, and be upfront and honest about that.
Yeah, so what we have here are the rules, and then we have the application of the rules and the guidance the Vegan Society
what's the difference?
Well, I'm just going to explain if you just let me speak. The guidance the Vegan Society have produced is about how to apply the legal rules, and that will vary depending on the context. And as you quite rightly say, not every employer is the same. We have to take into account the size, the number of employees, whether or not they have numerous fridges. You know, the place I worked last was a law office in Edinburgh, and there were a number of fridges. There were 4 or 5 fridges. And as my 1 carton of plant milk increased to about 5 cartons because there were hundreds of employees and many of them were going vegan, it would have made perfect sense to have designated a fridge for all of the plant milk instead of it being dispersed throughout. That would not have been difficult, but I appreciate that that is not the case for every employer. And so perhaps the separate shelf in a fridge example was one that shouldn't have been included in general guidance, but the other general guidance that's given has been largely ignored, which is that if you're providing food for employees, you should provide vegan food. If you're providing cow's milk for employees, you should provide plant milk. If you are organising a work event, make it inclusive. Don't have it at the zoo. Don't have it at the races. There are many, many activities employees can do together.
And don't have a hog roast.
Animal exploitation. Exactly. There's no necessity to have a hog roast. So what it's about fundamentally is training, and we can offer that for free by conference call, by Skype. We will discuss with employers their particular circumstances and help them to understand and adapt, because most employers want to make those changes.
03030 80 55 55. We're talking to Barbara Bolton from Go Vegan World. She's their legal counsel, and the businessman Max Mackin. And we want your calls on this as well. Do you think this is where our workforces need to go, our workplaces rather, need to go? Stephen in Newton Abbey. Hi, Stephen.
How you doing, William? I'm just a little bit concerned whenever I heard there about the request for things like a separate shelf at the fridge, or even a separate fridge for vegan products. I suffer from celiac disease, so I have quite a bad intolerance of gluten. Yet at my workplace, I've got no rights whatsoever to say I want a separate fridge or a separate shelf. I mean, I just have to really put up with it. I have to make sure that my food is wrapped up. I have to make sure that it can't be contaminated. I don't really see the difference between that and vegans. Especially whenever they don't actually have a need not to eat, they just simply don't want to eat animal products.
Good question, Stephen. Thank you very much. We'll get you an answer, or try to get you an answer from Barbara. Hi, Barbara. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's the legal position, and then there's the practical real-life position. And in the practical real-life position, I would hope that most employers would like to hear from an employee who has a celiac disease and talk through how that impacts on them and what they can do. The legal position is that because veganism is a moral conviction, a fundamentally held moral conviction, and we've recognised as a society that we will give that the same protection as we give religious beliefs, quite rightly so, because it makes up such a fundamental aspect of a human person. Veganism is given these legal protections, and it means that we cannot be discriminated against either directly or indirectly in the workplace, and nor can we be harassed. Now, I don't think any employer should want their employees to be harassed on any basis, and I would hope that by discussion with your employer you could resolve that, but I don't think that impacts on the rights of vegans. And as I said before, the separate shelf, I'm not convinced that is something that will be reasonable in a number of workplaces, but in some workplaces it will. In larger employers' offices where there's multiple fridges and many vegans, it will be possible.
Stephen, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Yes.
What do you make? What do you make of that reply?
I don't think it's could address the issue at all about people with an actual medical condition not to have their food in inverted quotes contaminated. It's simply just looking at. That answer really was just looking at veganism as a pseudo religion or a moral issue. But the fact is if my food does get contaminated, I could end up in hospital. And I don't really think a vegan would end up in hospital if they had a drop of ordinary milk or somebody splashed a yogurt on it.
Stephen, thank you very much. There's only so many different angles in this we can cover, but I want to also deal with this harassment issue and banter in the workplace. You get a lot of banter in the workplace. Sometimes it's appreciated, sometimes it's not, for all kinds of reasons. Do you think, Max, that employers need to do more to protect vegan staff from humiliating banter or jokes that demean their moral choices?
Well, I'd like to think that most employers, in fact I'd say all employers, have an understanding now. They're a lot more intelligent about this sort of thing, and they're a lot more intelligent about the impact that these things can have within their workforce and within the products they produce. So I'd like to think if people come in, and you can have a little bit of banter, and I was sort of, to my point of view, if it's done in good faith and it's been taken in good faith, then it's okay. And there's a line, if it steps over the line, then it has to stop immediately. And anybody who, be they vegan, be they celiac, or any other sort of walk of life, needs protected. And I'd come down on it extremely heavy if I thought someone within my employment or someone who I was advising allowed stuff like this to go on.
You know, it's interesting when we talk about veganism, it seems to be one of those trigger topics for some people. It seems to bring out some of these texts. I literally, hang on a wee second. Some of these texts I literally couldn't read out. They're so offensive about vegans, and you see this, Barbara, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, for example, and this is offensive, but it's not one of the worst. Vegans are morphing into food fascists. We love the word fascist these days in every context of life. Why do you think your choice, Barbara, triggers so many people?
The genuine answer to that is because I believe the vast majority of people know that what we're doing to other animals is wrong, and they're participating in it every day a number of times, and that bothers them. And when a vegan is in the room, that is reflecting back to them that it's not necessary. They can survive perfectly well without doing that. And most vegans don't bring it up in the workplace because it's not comfortable for them to do so. Some do, but most do not. But it comes up because their colleagues bring it up. It comes up because of the defensive reaction to the fact that there's somebody there who is not eating animals' bodies and things that are taken from animals.
I think it sort of has to come. If you're the vegan in a workplace and you're on your own, I think sort of there would be a responsibility on you to sort of like to educate people, like because you know you've mentioned veganism as some sort of like moral crusade and stuff, but there's loads of athletes who are vegans because it enhances performance, like Scott Jurek, who's the ultra marathon guy. There's like the world's strongest guy, Patrick Boumian.
But let's just we're nearly at the end of the
because it enhances performance.
I know we're nearly at the end of the time, but let's just make a real clear distinction. There's a difference between a vegan diet.
Yep.
Bill Clinton has lived on a vegan diet for many years for heart reasons, and veganism, which is a moral perspective, where you're making a choice which is shaped by your moral view of animals and of human beings in a relationship with animals, not simply a dietary choice. So there, of course, you've got examples of people who have vegan diet choices, Max, but what we're talking about here is people who have this perspective and want it protected.
If you are a vegan, you may not be a veganism. You may not believe in veganism.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So the protections apply. We know the protections apply to vegans like myself who respect the rights of other animals. We don't know that those protections would apply to people who are purely following a diet. If they were able to convince an employment tribunal that they followed a philosophy of life that was cogent and serious and worthy of respect, then maybe it would be. It would depend on their particular viewpoint. But all we know at the moment is that people like myself who avoid all forms of animal exploitation, they are protected. And just to clarify, Patrick Boumian is vegan. He does avoid all animal products in recognition of the rights of other animals. Scott Jurek is just a dietary vegan and has promoted animal products recently. So.
And I wonder if employers would want to be involved in having conversations with staff, Max, about those issues so that you understand one another.
100%. You know, to be fair, it's something that's sort of like, if someone has that belief and someone wants to embrace that lifestyle and stuff, it should be appreciated. People should sort of respect and understanding towards it. The workplace now is a very different arena than it was 30 years ago. There's lots of things come into it, and people have to be respectful. And any employer, anybody who employs people, wants them to work to their full potential. So getting behind them, encouraging them in what they want to do.
Someone just texted here, do vegans allow breastfeeding of babies? This is milk after all.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, this one.
It's human milk. It's a question.
It's a question.
Point. It's human milk, isn't that right, Barbara?
Well, it's about the fact that it doesn't involve any form of exploitation. A woman's bodily fluids are for her baby. A cow's bodily fluids are for her baby, her calf. And so they're not for us. For us to take a calf's milk involves us exploiting them and killing many, many of them as well. I would say that a larger employer would be prudent to assume they have vegans in their workplace and contact us for information about training and a better understanding about veganism.
Text here from Jane. I have a vegan niece niece and nephew, we should respect their choices. And that's an interesting dynamic we're in today, with a lot of younger people, not just younger people, but a lot of younger people getting into veganism and taking it seriously. Thanks to both of you, Barbara and Max. That is it from us.